for the record, my name is Mary Waldron. I'm the Executive Director of the Old Colony Planning Council. And with me today is Lori Muncy, and she is the Director of the Community Planning and Economic Development Department, as well as Megan Fournier, who's the Senior Administrative Assistant for Old Colony Planning Council. More importantly, this effort has, at the request of the town of Avon, and with us is Greg Enos, town administrator, as well as Bill Fitzgerald, DPW department chair. I'm not getting your title right, Bill, I'm sorry, but and along with other titles that you have for the town. But this has been a bit of a process. Many of the communities across the Commonwealth do go through open space public listening sessions, as well as the open space plans. And the value is that it really given an opportunity for the community members to have engagement, have town folks be engaged. But I really want to be able to give a shout out to those, to the town for being so forward thinking and applying for this fund. Applying for these funds also open up opportunities for other state funding. But with that, I don't know if Greg, if you would like to say any comments before heading into the presentation.
I would like to thank Old Colony Planning Council and Bill Fitzgerald and others who have been involved in the process, the Civic Association, COA, and library who are helping out, getting out information and providing the survey and getting this information out. As Mary said, this is a big step for the town in terms of finalizing this process and make us eligible for grants. But it also gives us insight on the different things that going forward the town would like to see about capital improvements in terms of the town. So there's a lot of different avenues that this funding and this plan will allow us to be part of and hopefully create some additional open space. But I think everyone saw through COVID and the pandemic the importance of outdoor livable spaces and activities that people can get out on their own and be able to have access to that. And having this process started allows us to really move forward in that regard.
Thank you, Greg. Bill, would you like to say a few words?
You're muted, Bill, if you were planning on saying something.
No, it's been a good process. I especially appreciated working with the working group, which met a few times, worked with Elijah and Laurie and Mary and folks. And I just found, having been here in Public Works, and there was a lot of remarkable consensus on what ought to be done going forward. And as Greg said, this will guide a capital plan to implement.
Thank you, Bill. And as you said, this is a village, right? So there is Old Colony Planning Council is sort of like, I want to say Switzerland. We're the independent organization taking data, reviewing, providing thoughts and connectivity. But this could never really have been done without the interaction and communication with the town. So with all of that, I just want to say thank you to the OCPC team, but most importantly, the Avon, and for being, again, forward thinking. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Megan.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. A lot of what I'll be going over personally is just a quick overview. We aren't sure who is called in, if you're aware as to what's been going on and what an open space plan is and what the purpose of it. And so it's really just, we're going to do a quick overview as to what it is, the process that the team at OCPC has been working with Avon on, and kind of the next steps for it. And then we'll be kind of welcoming any input that you might have that may have not been reflected in what we've discovered. So first thing is the Old Colony Planning Council. In case you aren't aware, we are a regional planning association. We represent 17 communities throughout southeastern Massachusetts, mostly the Plymouth and some of the Bristol County. And as you can see here, we offer services such as assisting towns with their natural resource and environmental planning, transportation planning, comprehensive land use planning, economic development, GIS systems, which is mapping, and then area agency on aging. So I think again, for some of you who aren't aware of what an open space plan is, it's really taking a look at a town or a city or wherever you live, and checking out the space that's kind of, as it said, is available to be used. And that includes, again, you can see this list, so I won't be repetitive, but really it's a lot of your outdoor spaces and how the town utilizes that. We're going to be focusing a lot on what this recreation plan is. And so again, this is what's been being worked on by the town and OCPC for quite some time now. A lot of research goes into learning and discovering the open spaces and prioritizing what is felt to be what you'd like to be worked on and what the needs are from the town. And you may have seen, and at the end, I'll show you a link as well to a roughly 500-page document that really kind of goes everything in depth for this process. This is kind of part of the public process of really kind of making you aware as to what's going on. And the plan components really kind of go over the summary, the goals, the action plans, and everything that's gone into it. The vision of Avon is consistently sought to protect historically valuable open space, including protection of the town water supply, and provide high quality, well-maintained recreational programs that provide opportunities for the residents regardless of mobility. The town has a commitment towards equitable public spaces connected by multimodal accommodations, including bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, accessible for all abilities and ages to support the citizens' vision of a livable and healthy lifestyle. And again, that was developed over this time to kind of just determine the purpose of what this whole project really has been about. So next up is over the past year or so, there has been some public surveys that have gone out to the town. And this is just a quick really recap as to some of the answers that we felt captured a lot of what it is as a town you've been looking for. So they're the two biggest outreach surveys that we did. One was first collected via working with the Council on Aging. We received roughly 175 responses on that. And then we wanted to target a broader outreach as that kind of encapsulated a lot of the elder population, and we wanted to ensure that everyone was represented. And so the second survey brought us in 195 responses. So it's a really great sample size as to what the town might be interested in. So one of the main questions that we asked was, are you satisfied with the places for children and youth to play and hang out in town? And as you can see, it's a big 62.5 essentially of respondents said no. Next question was, when asked to check the top recreational facilities they feel are needed, survey respondents indicated that of the large list that we had asked, these are the top 5. So children's play areas, as you can see, again, these percentages are based off of people selecting multiple options. So it doesn't necessarily, 30% is just a piece of it, but it is one of the highest needs. That includes a large park with many facilities, bike trails, conservation areas, and a splash pad. Additionally, they asked to identify the top 3 athletic facilities that they were looking for. And of that, the top 5 that kind of popped up were basketball courts, as you can see, is a very high 80%, soccer fields, baseball fields, tennis courts, and football fields. As a note too, there were some written in options, which means they weren't an opportunity to kind of be pulled on, but those were also written in with swimming pools, a track, and a skate park. So essentially, that was only just a few questions from the entire multi-survey process. Yes, Bill?
I just wanted to clarify that there were 2 different pools, so you can't compare 33% want tot lots with 70% want basketball courts. They're talking about 2 totally different populations. When if you got into the report in detail, you see there's a tremendous amount of use and support for both of those, as well as other things. Just
correct. And as you were saying, Bill, I mean, a lot of the survey results, the percentages aren't necessarily reflective of the specific people that only 30% total. It's when you're looking at survey data, you know, that's just happens to be the top percentages of different things. So as Bill was kind of saying, it's not necessarily how many people have responded only to recommending that one option. So, and there are different questions that kind of provide different feedback. So that is a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Bill. So as a summary of a lot of the questions, we mostly took a look at comments because comments always tend to give a lot additional feedback. And between the survey results and those comments, some of the main items that residents kind of brought up as feedback was that there needs to be an installation of up-to-date equipment at all town playgrounds. There needs to be a better distribution of local tot lots with sitting areas, as well as better distribution of exercise facilities. As we said in the other section, updated basketball courts, soccer fields, tennis court access. We know that some of the comments on there was gaining access to the tennis courts as they're locked oftentimes. So there needs to be safer parking was a big concern, as well as better and more trails for walking, running, and biking. So with all that, we put together goals. And so that got condensed into 5 goals for the purpose of this plan. And each kind of have objectives that relate to those goals. So the first one is a recreation goal. So in summary, it's really focusing on making sure that the parks, there is equitable access in all neighborhoods for kind of equal distance to be able to get to the similar needs as well. Making sure that there is increased engagement within the community, advocating for improved spaces for people with disabilities, as well as continuing to develop the local and regional trail network. Our second goal is really focused on the recreation access. And so those objectives that we're going to be aiming towards is providing experiences for people with a variety of mobility, improving access to information about these facilities and what the town is doing to work towards it, improving access to parks for community members, and improving trail connections and filling the gaps of those existing trail networks. So essentially, it's an extension off of the first goal and really focusing on the access piece and communication. For our natural resources goal, it's focusing a lot on the conservation of the lands that you have in your area, identifying and prioritizing additional areas that might be considered significant open space to use or to conserve. Again, use town development standards to protect the open space and natural resources, and develop and implement a policy for climate change adaptation and mitigation that would also be continued forward as the years go on. For our fourth goal, we focus on watersheds and infrastructure. So that focuses a lot on your water management. There is the continuing to implement the stormwater management program, managing the improvements to the existing greenways and also seeking for new ones, using new development and redevelopment as an opportunity to make improvements to your infrastructure, and creating a climate action plan to update regulations to reduce the vulnerability to flooding, severe weather, and extreme temperatures. And lastly, the fifth goal focuses on land conservation, and that is aiming to work collaboratively, with neighboring towns and regional entities to work together to protect and manage our natural resources, identify additional measures that help us fund and protect significant open space, maintain and increase funds, designation for the ongoing maintenance and management, and identifying opportunities to link protection of wildlife corridors to other open space interests and larger community planning processes. So with these goals provides us with a 7-year action plan that this whole plan kind of aims us towards. So for the first year after this gets approved, this focuses a lot on receiving a grant from the state to be able to fund these projects. But first thing is that we need to assemble and assess. So that focuses a lot on putting together a committee to identify kind of what has been discussed during this plan, and studying and designing ways to actually improve the availability of these resources. For year 2, the main goal is to engage the public. So that's going to be a lot of educating the public on what is the goal that you'll be working towards, working with the town departments to ensure that there's appropriate information, engaging volunteers in the open space and trail work, and then considering the adoption of the Community Preservation Act. And as you can see, it allows communities to receive state grant opportunities for community projects. The next is producing funding. So that's going to develop funding sources, funding opportunities, and start working towards regulations for items such as permits for green streets and complete streets. Year 4 is a new project protocol. So that's really just ensuring that all towns, when they're developing new projects, it's considering the different opportunities that this open space plan has been working towards, which includes enhancing greenways and ensuring that it's part of their request for proposals as they recommend it. It's also updating municipal plans and revising the town level open space plans to ensure the climate change impacts are addressed. And then years 5 through 7, plus moving on from there, it's really going to be focusing on a final set of guidelines, considering the adoption of the Green Communities program, continuing to plant trees and add shade, and supporting the acquisition of land that will increase drinking water supply protection. So again, that's just a very quick overview for our town. So with that, I would like to see if anyone has any questions, has any input towards what's been talked about. If there's anything that you feel is missing that you really are passionate about that you'd like the town to consider, then we're very open to getting your comments and your questions. As you can see on this slide, which will be available on our website, which can be found here, or you can scan the QR code. The full open space and recreation plan is available online for you to read. You know, it's a lot of content, but it is really exciting information for you to kind of see what is down the pipeline for the town of Avon.
Megan, there's a couple of things. So there was a question in the question and answer part, and it said how many people are in the audience. Lori answered 7, but I'm looking at 12 in the attendee list, and there's 5 of us on the panel. And then Bill Fitzgerald has a question.
No, that was a mistake. Sorry. I'm all set. Yeah, I'm all set. I don't know if you can hear me.
No, we heard you.
Okay, sorry.
We're wondering
No.
if there's any others who have a question.
And obviously, there's a lot of information that kind of gets presented right now if you weren't already aware of these details. If you end up having any other comments or questions, you can email Lori Muncy, who's on the call with us today, at lmuncy@ocpcrpa.org, and she'll be able to take that information and present it to Avon.
I do have a question. Rick Jordan.
Yeah.
I assume other towns do open space and recreation plans. If we were to look at some other OSRPs from other towns nearby, would we see the similar 5 goals as what we see in this draft Avon plan?
Lori?
I'm going to put that to Lori.
Mhm.
Well, each town's goals might be geared a little differently. A lot of our communities live near the ponds, and their goals are really focused on protection of those water resources. So it just depends on which town you're working with.
Awesome. I think Bill mentioned to me that the survey questionnaire that went out to the public did not ask about pickleball courts, but there might have been some feedback along those lines. Was there any feedback?
Yes, there was. There was some requests for pickleball courts. The actual survey results is found in the appendix of the plan, if you'd like to, look at them deeper. But there were requests for pickleball. And, one of our recommendations was probably to look at converting the tennis courts that you have now, rehabbing them into pickleball. It'd be kind of the easiest solution, but that would be up for the town to decide.
And Lori,
Right.
just to add on to what Lori just said, is that I've seen a few different open space rec plans in my day, and they, as she mentioned, does really kind of differ, separate between what the town needs and wants through the survey. So I've seen them where they're strictly all on preserving open space and making sure you're purchasing open pieces of property to maintain it, to it's all recreation, it's all facilities, it's all that. So they do differ, and I think the plan kind of mimics what we got in terms of our responses. I do see one question, Mary, if you want me to take a stab at it. It was about working with Park and Rec.
Yes, please. I know that Bill had answered it. Please go right ahead.
Yeah, so there was a question about working with the Park and Rec Commission. This process is not necessarily just Park and Rec, it's really conservation, planning, all the other groups. Once we get this plan in place, it would be heavily working with those groups, as Megan had in there about looking at an open space type of committee, and working heavily with the open space group that would have a lot of components with Park and Rec. Because if you saw from the survey, there's a lot of recreational activities in terms of playgrounds and basketball courts and pickleball courts. So that would all be worked with the coordination with Park and Rec, the Board of Selectmen, and other departments that are involved.
Thank you, Greg. Steve K has a question, so I'm going to ask him to unmute.
Hello, Steve Kraskowski. This is a question more for, I guess, town folks, not necessarily for the planning council, but maybe it will be. But my question kind of had to do with DW Field Park. I know a big chunk of that is in Avon, but I still consider myself fairly new here, being here for about 5 years. It always kind of seems like a lot of that stuff falls on Brockton. And I know that they just got like a big giant grant to redo the park. I guess it was a few questions about like, will the town of Avon have any input or, involvement with some of the grants and some of the improvements in DW Field Park, because a lot of it is in Avon. And I guess part of my question was like, kind of, what's up with that? Like, how come Avon isn't more involved with that DW Field Park? So thanks.
So anyone want to take a stab at it? I could throw my half-brain version of it into it. I know Phil dropped off, but it is a conundrum and a quandary that we've been dealing with for a while. DW Park, even though it's partially in Avon, the Brockton controls DW Field Park in that regards of maintenance and repairs and everything else. We requested, we asked them, we talked to Tim Carpenter a lot in terms of things going on. And part of that grant that they got, Bill Fitzgerald and myself did work with the Wildlife Trust to give input on what we would like to be seen on there. So we are trying to work with them on doing some of those things, but the park itself is basically a City of Brockton park, and we are just the wonderful bystanders of having it in our part of in our town. And I think we try to work with them on certain things, and I think both the town and city know the difficulties of maintaining a park of that size and the amount of paving and projects that are there. And I don't know the process with the Wild Trust, if someone has more information on that, but I do know that we have been involved in working with them, and I believe part of it is to make sure that the Avon parks are not left in the lurch in terms of that process. Because we have been good partner with the city of Brockton with some of those events and things that go on in the park. I'll leave it with that. I know Bill might have more information as well as the lawyer.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that came out initially with the working group and then really with the survey was the use and interest in DW Field Park. And I've been here 8 years and I never really heard that. You know, I deal with parks and rec in this community a lot. And it just came out so strong, and we've already started working. At the same time, Wildlands Trust had independently gone to a foundation and came up with money to do a master plan, more or less, for the park over the next 3 years. That's really planning type money that they've got. But we're working with them on implementation grants already, including we've been looking at on Old Pond, which technically is Avon's, some type of safety improvements for bikes and pedestrians there. A lot of moving pieces, but I've met with them a couple of times out in the park. And they're definitely know we want to be at the table. We're willing to work with them and support them. And it's a very high priority of the town, coming from everybody who's been involved here.
So I'm going to add a couple more things on that because I think this is a really good point as well. Not only Steve, but then also Malik, the thoughts of improving the Avon side. So once we get that, but the Wildland Trust is, I'm not going to repeat myself. It is a feasibility first study, but there is also the Friends of DW Field Park. That is really a great group of cross-section of both folks from Avon as well as Brockton. And they are reconstituting themselves. There's a new president. They're being much more engaged on things. What we can do is, I think if only their website is not up and functioning yet, but they're going to revitalize that. And but there is a Facebook page, and maybe we can drop that into the chat to answer that. But that's a good way, I think, as citizens. I am a biker and I am in Brockton, but I cycle and I go all the way to the Avon side. I do 3 times around on the Avon side and I come back to Brockton. And all the things you talked about in terms of the repairs, I see it, I feel it. And so that is one piece that the Friends of DW Field Park. Additionally, OCPC, we as a regional partner, I mean, we can, and I know that Town Administrator Greg Enos had talked about reaching out to Bill Carpenter. Perhaps this might be even a conversation that Greg, maybe even to have with the mayor, and just say that, talk about this point and how it's being brought forward. But we can serve as a convener. In addition to that, Wildland Trust has an office space in our Old Colony Planning Council that we donate to them so that we know the importance of what work they're beginning as an independent, as experts in the field of protecting open space. So there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of DW Field Park, and hope that it only grows from there. I hope that answers the DW Field Park. There's a lot more to become, and certainly with this group, we have your contact. We'll continue to keep updates on the progress of what the Wildland Trusts are doing.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Greg.
Tim Carpenter.
Tim Carpenter, I did. Oh, good Lord. I'm sorry. Thank you. Tim Carpenter. God rest his soul for Bill, right? Rick Jordan has another question, right, Rick?
Yes, that's great to hear about DW Field Park. I'm also a biker. I biked in the park this morning. I did the whole loop. It's really a great asset, I think, for Avon. I did try to get involved with DW Field Park a year ago, and it was pretty impossible. There was no group that could be contacted, or when I tried various methods to contact them, there was no response. So it's good, but I did see that about a month or 6 weeks ago, perhaps, they had a meeting. I only learned about it because I saw a flyer when I was biking through there. I otherwise would not have known about it. And it's good to hear they're trying to revitalize the Friends of DW Field Park. I would also add that I think the road condition around Old Pond street is pretty bad and even dangerous. Particularly the small 50-foot diagonal between DW Field East Parkway and Old Pond Street, and particularly from a bicycling standpoint, to me, it's dangerous. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Rick. And Rick and Steve, we probably have your emails, but do me a favor, if you can both email Lori, since her contact information there, we'll connect. It so happens to be, it's all sort of in family, right? So Joanne Zigman, one of our staff members, is on the board for the Friends of DW Field Park. She is a very strong advocate for the environment, for natural resources. And knowing Joanne and how she works, that she will be dogged about growing this group. So there was an annual meeting, I believe was in May, and it was held in downtown Brockton. And I kind of said, we shouldn't be holding these meetings downtown Brockton, we should be holding them at DW. But it was also the weather in terms of not being unsure. So it was the best quick thing that they were able to do. But the more the merry that we can get. So Rick and I know that Steve both have said having difficulties, let's get you connected to that group, as well as Rachel, who is with Wildland Trust, wants to meet with just about everybody in any group that is available. So not just only public officials, but if there's a citizens group as well. So just on that point, I think we've got that. So Rick, do you still have a question?
I had another comment if you have time.
Sure.
I'm also a pickleball player. I find it pretty interesting that people, I'm in my 60s, and I find it pretty interesting that people who are playing pickleball are often in their 50s and above, although of course there are people younger than that involved. But it really appeals to that somewhat older age set from 50 to 70 because it's a bit safer than tennis. It's still a good workout. And so it's kind of an interesting sport. And it's easier than tennis, for instance. So it's an interesting sport from a demographic standpoint. I don't know if Avon can afford to have a pickleball court. I'm not insisting on it or pushing hard for it, but I find it an interesting contrast with the needs of say 5-year-olds to 18-year-olds in terms of basketball courts and so on. So, and Avon has an interesting demographic where we have about an equal size older population with the younger set. So I think if you compare the age 0 to 30 to age 50 to 90, it's about the same percentage in Avon, which I think is kind of interesting.
So Rick, on that point, to not drag out the meeting for this, is that I did meet with the chair and vice chair of the recreation and talk about the Bartlett Street facilities, and they're going to do a survey on things that they would like to be seen there. We met with a couple different people before in terms of vendors on potential resurfacing it, and they'll have some additional meetings on that to look for input in kind of look at what the funding sources will be for that type of project. So they're going to be looking at that area and will probably be the location. So there is some stuff going on. I just don't know when it might get done, but it is something that their Park and Rec is taking an active role in.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Greg.
Yep.
So I do want to read, there's a question that Malik has been patiently waiting to be answered. So it's tough for kids to cross certain busy roads in our town, especially if they are disabled. Any thoughts on pedestrian bridges?
I'll take a shot. I was just typing an answer. Pedestrian bridges, less so, no, but there's been a lot of work on bike lanes and pedestrian, new sidewalks, things like that as a first step. Harrison and Pond will include bike and pedestrian accommodations or, striping, all that stuff, which then gets folks up into Old Pond in that part of DW Field Park. But it's definitely, there's something called a complete streets plan we're working on that would be something we'll put out for draft comment that'll look for key areas to improve what you're talking about.
And on that, Bill, is just the Mass DOT is working right now on making AD accessible transitions along Route 28, doing other sidewalk improvements from East High Street, which is where the fire station is, all the way to the Randolph line. We have worked with the capital committee and plan to put in those solar powered beacons for certain areas in front of the high school, and we're going to plan to put a couple more in other areas that we know there are high traffic areas for school age children who are walking. So we are aware that there are some areas that are problematic. We're trying to work with what we can in terms of sidewalk repairs and improvements, and making sure we work with the state to have them fix their portion of Route 28, as well as any Chapter 90 street projects, is to make sure we take care of the sidewalks as well.
Thanks, Greg. Bill, and thanks for the question. There's another question in the question and answer. I'm only hearing of this open space plan. Are there any other surveys coming up? There is still time, if I'm right, that Lisa can answer the questionnaire, or is there, I think this is done, right, Lori?
Yeah, the survey closed last fall, I believe. But any comments that you have or suggestions, please email them to me immediately or in the next week. And I'll put them in the plan so that at least it'll be addressed in the plan. But I don't know of any future surveys the town has in mind.
And the only other survey would be on the Bartlett Street, as I mentioned, about what might go there, and what would be the best option for that. That would be really the only other survey that I know of right now. I know Park and Rec is working on that aspect of it, so that's the only one that I know of.
Rick has a question. Oop. I think you need to just unmute yourself, Rick.
Hello, yes.
Okay.
So if I look at, I think it's section 7E, which focuses on funding sources. And I think the three main sources, there's three main sources cited there, one of which is state recreation grants, which I think have like a 50% match to them or something. And then possible, I think federal funding might have been a third, but the primary one that caught my attention was the CPA tax, which is an addition to the real estate tax. Avon currently does not have a CPA tax. In other words, and what it is an addition to our real estate tax. And one can add up to 3% to our real estate tax bills through CPA. I know, for instance, Randolph has this in place. So I don't know, I'm a little concerned that the plan is trying to make a case for CPA tax, higher taxes. I know our real estate tax bills went up quite a lot last year from FY 21 to 22, an average of 9%. And I've done a spreadsheet on that and shared that with the Board of Selectmen. So I think one of the concerns coming from this is that plan is primarily a push for more taxes. And so I don't know if there's any initial response to that.
I can tell you, well, I was going to say the town is shaking their head no, and from Old Colony Planning Council, this is not ever the purpose of open space plans throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It is actually a very tedious process of identification, assessment, research, data. So that is never, ever, ever from the state perspective, nor from, I think, from the many open space plans at Old Colony Planning Council, that never will be the purpose of doing this. And I do know that these plans are necessary in order to get other state grant funding. And that is, I think, the purpose that the town has, is looking for other alternatives than putting the burden on the town. But I'm not going to speak for the town, but that generally is why these are done. So Greg, would you like to take this?
I mean, I think without going too far into it, I think every single open space rec plan imaginable, when it says to possible funding sources, the CPA is going to be listed because it is typically, there's a section that is strictly for open space and planning. So it is an available funding source for any town that chooses it. So it's not saying that Town of Avon has to do it this way. It's that it's an option for any town who's looking for funding for that. Not that we would be looking at it in any regards. I don't think we would be in that process of looking at it, but it's just the due diligence section of saying, here's all the different available sources, and that's what's there. Whether or not the town goes after every single grant that's available, because again, just because a grant's available doesn't mean the strings that are attached are going to work for the town, but it's a list of what's available. So it's just a matter of figuring out what's best for the town and looking at that different area.
Thank you.
Mary's charging me for support letters now for grants from them.
So there's a question in the question and answer. It's yes, this is from Lisa. Yes, it's tough for me to cross my street. Also 129 Pond across from Porter. I would love a crosswalk or crosswalks part of this plan.
I don't believe.
There
Lori,
is a section on pedestrian and bicycle access with maps that shows where you have existing sidewalks and where they should be constructed or could be proposed to be constructed. I don't remember the exact section off the top of my head, but it is in the plan.
But I don't think we indicate which ones that are going to be done. I think if there's ever a request, we kind of look at it and see. I know, and they always typically, like you say, Lori's in the plan, don't say where this connection form. So you'd always have to see. I know we have them on Malley, we have them on a couple different areas as part of the work going on Pond Street by Bodwell and things of that nature. So there's always a possibility that it could be somewhere we had one around there, but I would defer to Bill when they're going through and doing the plan. Because it's about crossing and accessibility on both sides of the street.
thank you, Greg. Before we get to you, Rick, I'm going to go. There's a new question that is from Marcy. When was the last open space study done? Has it been done before? If so, what came of it and how much does it cost? Lori, do you want to answer that? Or Bill, are you answering that? Just unmute yourself, Bill, if you'd like, either one.
I keep hitting the wrong button. Laurie can go ahead.
There were previous drafts of the plan. The most recent that I recall was 2004. But there was no evidence that those plans were actually approved by the state. So we're not sure if this is a new plan or if this is an updated version of the old plan. But once we submit this plan to the state, it will be adopted and it will be official.
And just talking about the costs, in true transparency, this is, I believe, 15,000, Bill?
Correct. There was a
15.
grant for 15,000 from
Town itself, I don't believe had a funding portion of it. I think it was through grants and through DLTA system. So it wasn't that it was the total cost is around 15,000, but the cost of the town, pending the final grant approval, is zero. I believe, give or take.
Thank you.
The total cost, Laurie, was 30, right? 15 DLTA and 15 from the open space grant.
correct.
And the town ended up paying 2,500 of that. So thank you, Old Colony, and thank you, Commonwealth of Mass.
Any other questions? Oh, Rick, I'm sorry, Rick, let me, you have a question, your hand is up. Thank you for waiting.
Yes, well, you can hear me?
Yes.
I just want to acknowledge the work that went into creating the open space and recreation plan. I think, Bill Fitzpatrick and the Old Colony have done a very good job pulling this together. And I think it's a nice step forward for the town of Avon. And I appreciate your work on it.
I can attest to that there is a lot of work that goes into it, and and it does take time to have it be proper. And most importantly, while perhaps one may say that because there's 11 or 12 attendees and with us on it does take time. And in the report it will show, Lori went door to door, and we went to concert meetings, when the concerts, and making sure we're going to where the people are, and really making sure that this is well advertised and well promoted. It's just hard, right? Busy lives during COVID. People aren't necessarily reading the normal way and the typical way of conducting things. But to your point, Rick, we have dedicated town officials. You obviously are all on this call tonight. You care about your community, and our role as the professionals, it wasn't me who wrote the report. Lori wrote that report, and Megan, and with Bill Fitzgerald's comments. And I will attest, at least over the last couple of weeks, the hours, nighttime, weekend, morning, it does take that to do it the right way. And we even still find there's some things that we can continue to tweak, but we don't have another year to do this. And I think the goal for all of you who are on this call would be, my advice as a older woman of I hope wisdom, would be stay involved in your community. If they're looking for people to be on committees and advisory boards, and just be involved and have that voice, and tell your neighbors to come and get that voice out. It's a challenge nowadays, right? Number one, people don't want to come forward and say what they think because they'll be chastised by some negativity. And that's a reality of the world we don't give up your voice. Certainly don't give up what you care about. These questions that were in either the chat or within the question and answer format, they're really important to hear that, right? To hear how much it costs. Is there another plan? How come we're doing again, right? The last thing anybody wants is a plan to sit on a shelf. And so I can attest to you. Her name is Melissa. She works for the state. She had tons of questions for what was originally submitted, and then back and forth. And they care about the those members of the community that may not have a voice. She specifically tried to say the young as well as the older population. Really wanted to make sure that this was a well thought out and well engaged report. So it's a lot of work, but it's so well worth it. And so Rick and Steve and Bernardo and Jason and Kathleen and Linda and Lisa, Malik, Marcy, the Parks and Recreation, and Warren, stay involved. And you do have Lori's email if you do have any comments about the report, and to continue to make sure that it is stay engaged. So thank you. That's my soapbox. Sorry. I do not see any other questions, and I do not see anything else in the chat. Maybe I'm going to look for anybody, Greg or Bill or anybody would like to have any final comments. Great. Just again, I would say for the town, right? You're a small community in the sense of maybe perhaps population, but you really have a lot going on in your community. And any chance that I will get, I do. I not only take my bike to Avon, but the people there have a lot of affinity with the area. And so we will look forward to seeing this product and this it be approved by the state. And when it does get by the state, we'll make sure that you get notified. So thank you all for being on here tonight. And thank you, Bill Fitzgerald, as well as Greg and the OCPC team. And with that, I'm just going to look at the chat. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.